Okay, so we are back now. So I had a question after the last video asking me how do I manage my recovery, my programming. He was saying, well, if the whole goal is to just take every set all the way with either heavyweight to failure or extended sets like partials, drop sets, all that kind of stuff, well, how do you actually manage recovery? Well, it's pretty simple, really. It's the recovery is built into the creation of the program, how I program my hypertrophy program for my hypertrophy clients and for myself. It's built in. So there's a few things. First of all, the exercises that you're using, right? You'll notice I'm using exercises which bias a certain muscle group. So that's the first thing. You're not using low bar squats, conventional deadlifts, flat bench presses. You're using exercises which are designed to kind of bias a certain area. So I'm going to be using hamstrings, seated leg curls. Also going to be using things like an incline press for the chest, maybe machine row for the back. So there are specific muscle biased exercises. You're not using very heavy generalized leverage based exercises. You'll also notice the form I use is pretty strict as well. It's not like once I fail, or up to the point I fail, the form is pretty strict. And yeah, afterwards I'm doing some partials, but yeah, it's pretty strict, it's pretty controlled. So it's not like I'm doing a bunch of heavy cheated rows or like dumb shit like that. You know, it's designed to ensure you're deleveraging yourself. You're making sure the stress is on the muscle, not on the tendons, ligaments, and just momentum, you know? So that's the first thing. Exercise selection. That's going to limit how much weight you can use, limit the systemic stress. And the net result is you can go harder in the gym if, you know, you've got the balls to do it, right? The other thing is repetition scheme. So you'll notice I don't do anything under about 10 reps. First set's up to 15, 17 reps, even on big, heavy compounds. Like I trained back the other day, first set was up to 17 reps, and then an additional 5 partials and whatever else, whatever other kind of bullshit I was doing at the time, right? So there's that. You got your repetition scheme. You want to go higher on the reps. Now, yeah, I think that's probably about it. One last thing. Overall volume. I think overall volume is not as high. So right now I'm experimenting with about 6 to 8 sets per body part per session. That is a good standard. I say experimenting, that's because I'm doing a asynchronous split. 6 to 8 is a good recommendation, you know, about 8 to 14 over the course of a week if you're training twice a week or more. I did a video about that recently. But anyway, for me, I'm on what most people would call the lower end of moderate volume. So, you know, moderate volume, 10 to 20 sets per week. I'm on the lower end of that. Averages out to about 9 sets a week if I train a body part 3 times every 2 weeks. But anyway, those 3 things, basically. Overall volume is kept low. Exercise are biased towards the muscles you're trying to work. And reps are kept on the higher side. All of that means you can just train harder and harder. So that is how it's done. I don't mess with the RAR and all that stuff myself. It can work, but it needs a particular style of programming, and it has to be followed thoroughly. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems with recovery. So then you're looking at deloads, you're looking at high volume stuff, higher frequency stuff. It's just a little more complicated. I like to place the emphasis on effort as the primary factor. Everything else is based around that. Right, next set. So the other thing I think would be good to discuss, which kind of came up from the last video, was this idea of how do you know people are training hard? And there was some very complimentary comments on my screaming and shouting and all that stuff. And yeah, you know, to a certain extent with me, that just kind of comes out, right? Plus, when I've got the microphone right next to my mouth, it gets exaggerated. You'll notice for the last exercise, I actually took it off and put it on the side. But that's not actually how you know someone's working hard. It's not whether they're shouting or screaming or making faces. Don't be fooled. You know, don't be fooled. I've seen people, none of you guys, right? But I've seen people go onto machines on here, and from the first rep, they're making a face. And not even the first rep, you know, even before they do a rep, they just get into position, they make a face. And they make noises and they shout and scream and all that stuff. And the way to really know whether somebody's working hard or not is if their repetitions slow down. Now I'm going to lay a little bit of science on you guys. Essentially, what happens is there is varying degrees of muscle recruitment depending on how heavy the weight is and how close to failure you are. Now, if you take a sufficiently heavy load, pretty much by the beginning, or if not the beginning, then towards the middle of the set, all of your muscle fibers will be working, right? Now, as we start to reach failure, some of those muscle fibers will start to drop out. And as those muscle fibers drop out, well, naturally, you have less force being produced, so the bar starts to slow down. And it slows and slows and slows until it gets to the point where it stops because the amount of muscle fibers which are still in the game, so to speak, are not enough to lift the weight. And so the weight fails. And that's when, of course, you can do things like partials and drop sets to carry on exhausting the muscle fibers that are still active. So the analogy is, let's say you've got a car that's broken down up a hill. And you get a bunch of dudes to help push the car. Okay, so as the car is starting to gain momentum, you get more and more dudes coming in and trying to get the car started, right? So what will happen is, as you get up towards this hill, some of the guys will tire out and they'll just sort of sit by the roadside, exhausted, wipe their brow, and let the rest of the guys carry on with it. Now, at a certain point, let's say you started off with 20 guys pushing this car, right? At a certain point, you might have 15, then you might have 10, and the car starts to slow down. That's the case with repetition. So it's not a matter of people shouting and screaming and making faces. That means nothing. Did the bar slow down? If it did, then that person was starting to hit those reps. If it didn't, I don't care. Not to offend anyone out there. I mean, obviously, you guys are more educated. You know this kind of stuff, but for the general population, look around. For those guys who are making a lot of faces, the bar's not slowing down. They're not anywhere close to failure. I mean, give them an Oscar, give them a standing ovation for the acting, but it means nothing. So, yeah, that's how you know. That's how you really know. That's how you really know. So yeah, just to kind of finish off that conversation about intensity, um, if you're making progress, then all good. Ignore what I say. The proof's in the pudding. If you're making progress, then you just carry on doing what you're doing. I have no problem with that whatsoever. My only goal with the channel is to try and help people towards making progress and just to unclutter some of the misconceptions. So if what I say doesn't jive with what you're doing, then yeah, forget about it. It doesn't matter. What I'm trying to emphasize is an approach which works. So hopefully, if you're feeling a bit confused, if you're trying to mix and match multiple approaches, this should provide a bit of clarity. So as I was saying, when it comes to training hard, don't be fooled. The facial expressions that I make or the sounds that I make, yeah, for some people it's a bit cringe. Other people, it says, I'm working hard. It's not what I look for though, personally. I don't personally, if I'm evaluating, say, a client's video, I don't look for the faces or the noise. I look for the rep slowdown. And this is the point of the talk. Kind of lost myself for a second, but the point of the talk is it's very difficult to portray or to tell somebody that they're not working hard enough. Because, well, if that's all they know, they're genuinely trying to work as hard as they can. Well, if you tell them, look, you could work harder, they can't visualize any harder. It's like saying to somebody who only knows how to count 1 to 10. It's like telling them to count past 10. They don't know how to do it. Their current scale is limited to 10. So when I'm trying to tell people, look, they can work harder, I try and provide objective criteria, such as the rep slowdown. Because subjectively, if you don't just tell somebody to train harder or shout about the value of hard work, then everybody in the room is going to jump up and down. But like an analogy I gave in my coaching group the other day was Pee Wee Herman versus David Goggins. They both think they're going 10 out of 10, right, in the training session. But I would suggest Pee Wee Herman's 10 out of 10 probably looks different to David Goggins' 10 out of 10, right? Because David Goggins has been practicing pushing his limits for decades now. So you have to expand what your current 10 out of 10 looks like. Does that make sense? Just let me know in the comments if I'm talking sense here, because I think it's the most difficult thing to communicate, because you have to communicate to people that their own experience of what is 10 out of 10 is subjective. It's not objective. It's the same with me. I don't think I'm the perfect trainer at all. Like those standing leg curls that I did just now, I don't think that was a 10 out of 10 effort. I honestly I was a little bit disappointed with myself. They were okay, but I just felt like I could have had more drive. And just a quick test for you is, if you come into the gym all sad and moped up versus coming into the gym all hyped up, listening to your hard style, with your caffeine in your system, which do you think is going to lead to a better objective 10 out of 10 performance? Whereas subjectively, you could be trying just as hard in both occasions. So again, subjective versus objective. So if I tell you you're not training hard enough, don't take offense at it. Look at the objective criteria. Did you slow down? Were there 3 to 5 reps at the end which were visibly slower? Or did you make a bunch of faces, scream a lot, and then stop your reps? And I'm not, obviously, you guys are intelligent, you're hardworking, you watch my videos, but, I'm just trying to give some people out there a bit of a wake-up call, that's all. It's pretty sweet. All right, so that is 6 sets of hamstrings done. I mean, I'll be honest. After those first 2 sets of the partials, the drop sets on the seated leg curl, my hamstrings were already pretty fried, which was nice. The standing leg curls were okay. The reverse hyper, which is a very nice piece of kit, is mostly something I do for like lower back, glutes. It's a good piece of kit. I'll sort of alternate between those, RDLs, stuff like that. But they were pretty nice, pretty sweet. Actually, very specialised piece of equipment I've never seen in the UK. So JD Gyms, hats off to you. So very obviously somebody in management knows what they're doing. They brought in some quite nice kit recently, so pretty sweet. Okay, we're going to move on to quads. This is my favourite at the moment for kicking off quads. It's a single leg extension. Going to get warmed up, and then we'll do the first working set. We're also going to do drop sets and partials and all that kind of mess and get really nasty. So yeah, I've kind of talked about intensity a lot and taking things beyond failure and all that stuff, but there are a couple of exceptions. So I would say things like squats, leg presses, which I'm about to do, deadlifts. For those, you're not really wanting to fail per se. Just the sheer heaviness of the weight is going to be enough. And just make sure you're going hard. Go to the point where you're maybe 1 rep away from failing. I think you need a combination of the heavy work, which is going to be super taxing on the muscles right from the off. Some of that, and then some of the, not lighter, but some of the exercises which are more conducive to going beyond failure. I think you need a combination. Oh fuck. Oh fuck. Oh, 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 fuck. Yo, quads are pumped. Right, so I wanted to finish off on the leg extensions, but somebody's on it right now, so I'm going to just sit on the calf raise machine, do 6 sets, just alternate back and forth. Now, So let me just kind of talk you through what my goals are for this session. Maybe with reference to the types of exercises that I do. So for across the 6 sets, I want to accomplish some heavy loading. There's got to be something which is heavy in there. Now, for the hamstring curls, it's maybe a little bit different because apart from a heavy compound like hip hinge, what can you do which is very hamstring orientated? Even heavy hip hinges, you've got to be very careful with doing them so they don't, your glutes and your lower back doesn't take over, right? So hamstrings for me, it's like seated leg curl. That's the big basic movement. Now for quads, I want to be doing some kind of heavy leg pressing or heavy squatting. The belt squat here is really nice, so that's a good option. Leg press is also a pretty good option. Now, alongside that, I also want to be doing some stretch squeeze work where I'm going beyond failure. So let's talk through the hamstrings. Hamstrings was a seated leg curl, was a big basic exercise, but I went above and beyond with that too. Then there were also single leg curls, which were, well, maybe the hamstrings isn't the best example because they're a bit of an unusual muscle group. Plus, I'm kind of babying my back at the moment. So let's go through, say, quads. All right, quads. One heavy exercise for a couple of sets, just to let my legs feel that load. I'm not particularly emphasizing the lengthened position or the shortened position. It's just big, basic shit, right? Which I think you need. I don't think you can get away from that. I think people would like to get away from that, but you can't get away from that. Then alongside that, I want something which I can do, which I can just bring the pain with, you know. So the single leg extensions were horrible. They were partials, well, failure, then partials, then drop sets, then failure, then partials. That was one set. That was horrible. And on top of that, I'm also going to do some leg extensions, probably superset with sissy squats. So there's a combination of heavy work and then very, very hard work. I think you need both. That's kind of what I want for every block of 6 sets in most muscle groups. Obviously, things like side delts, they're not going to get that. It's going to be mostly isolation. Things like calves, well, you're basically just straightening your foot. Hamstring curls, most of the time I'm biasing leg curl work. I'm kind of babying my back at the moment. Plus, even if you're doing hip hinges, you've got to be very careful it doesn't turn into a glute lower back issue. And I deadlifted a lot back in my day, but I still had poor hamstring development because unless you're actively trying to work your hamstrings, your lower back just takes over. But yeah, that's kind of what I want to accomplish. That's how I do things. Right, let's hit some leg press. Let's hit some calves. Oh, fuck. All right, so yeah, I wanted to do leg extensions with sissy squats, but there's somebody on the leg extension machine, and I don't want to go back to the single leg extension. So this is an exercise I've not done for a few years, and it's sissy squats with the big plastic bouncy ball behind your back. It's quite nice. It's good. It's a good way of doing sissy squats where you don't have to hold on to something. I mean, whatever. Like it all works. So let's give it a go. Just rep out to failure for 3 or 2 sets. Okay, so leg session done. Let's just sort of go over what we did today. 6 sets of hamstrings, 6 sets of layup of quads, also off camera, 6 sets of calf raises. That's about right for me. I've been bouncing around 6 to 8 for a while, but I find when I go lower, there's just a flick which kind of switches on, which I just go harder, and it leads to better progress. So I don't think it's the lower volume necessarily that's doing it. I mean, it could be, but it's the fact that I'm able to mentally take those sets further. I mean, I'll push the 8 sets hard as well, but it's just something about them which is, I don't know, I think everybody does it to a certain extent, but I think a lot of people just aren't aware they do it, that there's just a bit of a realization, I've got the rest of these sets to go, and there just isn't as much going all out. The way that I like to think about my sets is every set is the last one. So if I'm coaching somebody, if I'm training somebody, the mentality that I want to have is every set after your warm-ups is the last set of the day. So you may as well just give it everything. And I think the more sets you have, the harder it is to realistically kind of lie to yourself in that sense. So, but anyway, that's what we did. Pretty sick leg session, pretty good. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I talked a bit about intensity, how to spot good intensity, and hopefully that was useful. But in any case, just have fun with your training. You know, that's a big part of it. Have fun, train hard, and make it a part of your routine. And get jacked, man. That's what it's about. And on that note, I'm going to go eat some chicken.